Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I'm here today to share with you the Kabbalistic secrets behind seeing with a clear heart. And if you've been listening for the last few weeks, you know that we're gearing up for a cosmic reboot that's taking place next week. And these are the last few days that we have the opportunity in this energetic year to not only utilize all of the energy we downloaded last year, but also to create the most pure, the most expansive, and the most aligned vessel to receive light next week as we begin to usher in the energetic new year. So even though I'm all by myself today, I hope I can do justice to this really powerful topic and help all of us, not only those of you who are listening, but those of you who are listening now because someone shared this episode with you, that we will really create a fundamental shift within each one of us that will result in a global shift for the world. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast in which we provide our listeners with the most practical and powerful tools to navigate the coming 7 days as told to us by the wisdom of Kabbalah. And every week we end up offering to our listeners tools and wisdom that can not only help you make your way through the gifts and challenges of this week, but really wisdom and tools that can be used any week of the year, any year of your life. And because we're now in the final week of the month of Virgo, we're really, as I mentioned before, draining our energetic battery from that which we downloaded last year and making room for the infinite blessings that we desire for ourselves in the coming year. So I think it's important to start with the idea that every week in the month of Virgo that leads up to Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, but really it's the beginning of the year for humanity, knowing that the calendar year, the zodiac, the astrological year actually begins in the month of Aries, in the month of Nisan. We're really in the 7th month. And what's happening now, which is actually quite exciting, is that if you acknowledge the 7 days of creation that we learn about in Genesis, and Kabbalistically, we know that Rosh Hashanah, which is next Tuesday, so we're gonna backtrack a little bit. Next Tuesday is Rosh Hashanah. So if you count 6 days earlier, you'll land on the first day of creation, which this year falls on Thursday, the 17th. What that means is that the primordial forces of creation, of all things created, is actually gearing up starting this Thursday. And the Kabbalists teach that each person is subject to the laws of cause and effect, right? What you give is what you get. There's a lot of different ways that we express that concept, not only in Kabbalah, in just out there, in culture, in religion, in philosophy, that even be the change that you wish to see in the world is another version of that. And so the Kabbalists teach that there is a reality that we are going to experience, each one of us, next year, according to our thoughts, words, and actions in this year. And we do the work of Elul, the work of the month of Virgo, which is all of that introspection, reflection, tshuva work that we've been talking about these past few weeks, as a means to identify all of the boomerangs that we set off into the universe through our less than highest self thoughts, words, and actions. The more we collect, the more we can prevent from coming back to us. And the whole idea of this month and the spiritual work that we're going to do until the 10th day of the month of Libra is really about sweetening judgment. Sweetening judgment in Kabbalah is not about, are you being judged? And we talked about this last week. It's more of like a negotiating of terms, so that, if a person in this past year had an amazing awakening, enlightenment, realization, and they understood that there's certain patterns, certain behaviors, certain approaches that they're employing in their lives that are no longer working, and they make the effort to transform that, then they've already given their year an upgrade, right? They've already transformed the trajectory of their lives. Every change that we make has the power to do that. And that's why change is so essential. You can change or be changed. You can choose to do the spiritual internal work of transformation, or you can wait for the universe to change you. Either way, it's going to happen. And we've been saying this episode after episode after episode. The big revelation of this month, and again, if this is the first episode you're listening to or you haven't listened in a few weeks or few months, I suggest you go back to the episode. I think it was on the first, I think. It might have been, I think it was the first, September 1st, or it might have been the episode the week before. Maybe it was the 26th, 25th. August 25th. Sorry, I digress. Our whole focus has been to do that audit, to take stock, to do inventory on the past year, to have as many revelations or epiphanies as possible, to do the deep work of going back in time and feeling the disconnect, feeling the darkness, feeling the pain over the hurt or the darkness that ensued, and then paving the way to do things differently in the future. Now, this week specifically, I've heard from a lot of people saying, what do I do this week? How do I make sure I changed? How do I make sure I know I found enough things to work on? How do I know that I'm really doing the work? At this point, right, we're really literally in the final week. The countdown has begun, and especially considering that on Thursday, the engine of creation is already gearing up. The real work of this week is what the Kabbalists call purifying our intentions. And that's why the episode is called Seeing with a Clear Heart, because the work of this week to take that Virgo energy, which, as we've been talking about, is to be detail-oriented, to focus on the minutia, to focus on where you could be critical or judge or even assess. Like Virgos have excellent assessment skills. They're great consultants. They can help you figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. We want to turn that ability on our own internal work and recognize, see completely and clearly where our own selfishness, where our agenda, where our MO is interfering with the well-intentioned high consciousness work that we're trying to do. So this is not, and I'll say it in different ways in order to make sure that it was clear, but we know that each human being is given both a desire to receive for the self alone and a desire to receive for the sake of sharing. And the goal, a desire to receive for the self alone and a desire to share. The goal is to develop that desire to receive for the self alone, which is selfishness, which is worrying about what's going to be, how's it going to happen, what's it going to look like, to be consumed with what about me, or even to worry about, and the way that I help people really focus in on what does it mean? How does my own desire to receive for the self show up? It's to look at all those small ego desires, the desire to be right, the desire to be acknowledged. Sometimes it's the desire to be invisible, to not be seen. Sometimes it's the desire to be seen, but it's all related to the ego versus the soul's expansive viewpoint of, how can I grow? How can I help? How can I share? How can I elevate? How can I influence? Right? That expansive outlook that each one of us has inside shouldn't be confined by the small desires of the ego, but we unknowingly, that's not the right word, we unknowingly get trapped by it all the time. And so especially because we're coming to this powerful window where the gates are open and we want to open ourselves not only to receive the energy for the person that we are right now with our goals and our intentions and our desires, but we want to draw the energy for the person that we're going to become, which is an unlimited version of who we are today. So when we talk about purifying our desires, purifying our intentions, purifying our heart, what it really means is distinguishing first and foremost between the false, illusionary, egocentric me that's temporarily a part of my existence here on earth in this lifetime, and to be able to see through its corruptions, its convincings, its illusions, the movies that it creates in our minds that we think we're going to miss this or that, or we think we might lose this or that, or we think we have to chase or attack or swallow up this or that. That's all the ego. And even if we're honest with ourselves, even our spiritual work is tainted by the ego, because sometimes we do that work because we're trying to achieve something specific. We're trying to be, maybe we're trying to draw our soulmate. We're trying to achieve greater financial success and abundance. Maybe we're trying to heal a physical issue, right? There is a impetus that's driven by something in the physical reality. And you can argue with me, definitely, and you could even be right, that your soulmate or your health or your wealth is not a physical impetus. It's not a physical catalyst. But when you realize that if you weren't in your body, those things wouldn't be necessary, you realize that there is some degree of physical need, physical want involved in that the ego desires a piece of the action. And so the goal this week is to identify all of those areas where our small self, our ego influences our desires, our efforts, our quests for whatever it is we're putting energy towards, and to dissolve as much as possible that influence. Now, the first step is the recognition. And to me, that's not only, for me personally, that's the hardest step. For me, it's also in the work that we do with individuals who are trying to live their lives according to these principles. It's the hardest part is the recognition. Once you are clear about the short-sighted desire, you're looking for avoiding a sense of failure, or you're pushing towards something to happen because you can't let go. You have to see things through the end, or there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and this is the right way, and you have to show everybody. Like, you really look, and my suggestion for all of you who are listening and are open to do this work is to really ask yourself, with everything that comes up in the coming week, why do I feel that way? Why do I think that's true? Where did I learn that? How do I know that? Where does that story come from? Because at the end of the day, it's only us in the light of the Creator. And that's many years ago, I don't even remember how long ago, there was a movie called The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. And the premise of it, I won't give it all away in case you haven't seen it, but the premise of it is that it's basically a reality show experiment. Okay, I just gave it away. It's a reality show. Well, the title gives it away too, where Jim Carrey's character, his whole entire life for like 30 years or something like that, has been a reality show, and he starts to figure it out, and kind of the dismantling of his reality. So in a sense, we all kind of live in our own. I live in the Elisheva show. You live in the Susan or Bob show, right? We all have the entire universe putting on this elaborate production for the sake of getting our souls to reach its ultimate purpose, whatever it is that we individually committed to work through, to heal, to transform, and to share in this lifetime. Everything, the people who walk into our lives and out of our lives, the conditions, the financial situation, the weather, the government, it's all orchestrated to get us to our highest self. And so when you realize that, and realize growing up, you might not necessarily have known that or believed that or been taught that, but quite the opposite, that part of the work is dismantling that. So this is the week that we need to kind of dismantle our own Truman Show. We need to understand that there's so much that we subscribe to that is not based in truth, right? And Michael Berg often says, if you're worried about something and you realize that in 5 years from now, you're not even going to remember it, why are you worried about it now? Like, that's how you know if something is worth your worry, is if it's, permanent and lasting. And even then, there's definitely room in Kabbalah to argue you shouldn't even be worried about those things. But the main focus is really to take a hard, final look at the structures, the beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves, and ask, why do I think this is true? How do I know this is real? Where is my ego in this? Where am I attached? Where am I trying to control? Where are my fears? And we will see. That's the beauty of when the universe supports you to do this work. And you may be listening and being like, oh my God, this is already happening to me. I'm already seeing it. You are being supported to see it for the sake of cleansing it, releasing it, letting it go. And that's the work of this week. So it's really, again, being able to distinguish between I like to use the word agenda, because if you ask yourself, what's my agenda here, right? Maybe you're even volunteering for a cause that you believe in or that's important to you or that you're invested in, right? What's my agenda here? Why am I doing this? Maybe you have a friendship or a relationship where, you're looking at it, you're reassessing it. Maybe it's not so balanced. Maybe you find yourself irritated or annoyed. Ask yourself, why am I in this friendship? How did it start? What was my MO when I went into it? And is that still my MO? And starting to ask those questions, why? When did I start to believe that? How do I know that's true? And really breaking down the scenery, the set of our movie, so that in the coming year, only the things that are meant to be there, need to be there, that are sustainable, that there is circuitry and reciprocity, that there is energy, that there is, not everything is going to feel good all the time. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is removing the desire to receive from the self alone, removing those small ego desires from the picture, because it's draining. It's draining to feed that monster all the time. And when you're busy letting that monster feed off of the light that you make such an effort to connect to and stay connected to, of course you're going to be drained. So as we come into these last few days, I don't know what day you're listening, but Rosh Hashanah begins next Monday night. So let's say, as long as you're listening until Monday, I think it's the 21st, you're in prep mode. Afterwards, listen to the next episode. But the idea is, first and foremost, to be in observation mode. What's my desire to receive for the self alone? What's my agenda? Where's my MO? What's my intention here? And really breaking it down. Why? When did it become this way? How did I learn this? Like really getting into the minutia, the Virgo-like scrutiny that really only serves us when we approach our spiritual work and we're trying to break down those false barriers that are keeping us from elevating, moving to the next level, and then really having a desire to leave those illusions in the year that's about to wrap up. I am sure, even if each one of us manages to identify one, and if you only identify one, ask in your heart, ask the Creator to show it to you in all of its splendor. Really see how that agenda, let's say, when I say impure, it's not that it's dirty, but that it's soiled by the selfishness. To see that desire to receive for the self alone in its full regalia. You want to see it all. You want to see how it manifests, not only where you can identify it, but in all aspects of your life, and get excited when you see it, because you can't delete the files that you can't find. So once you find something, don't let go of it. Keep it in your awareness. Ask to see it completely and wholly, and know that the more that you accumulate, the more awareness, the more understanding. It's not about beating yourself up. You're not meant to feel bad after you find it. It's actually a celebration. because you can only transform what you can identify. And the more you can identify, the more fodder you have for your growth, hopefully leaving behind as much as possible in this year as we turn into the year that's coming, but also to have that increased awareness, to be more sensitive. And most importantly, I think the whole idea is that deep down inside each one of us, we have a pure heart. The goal is not changing our heart, not changing our soul, not changing our light, but literally to remove the veils that create these illusions, to remove the curtains that block us from seeing the true reality, the real opportunities in front of us, the ones that prevent us from feeling the other person, from being compassionate and empathetic to ourselves and to others, to being guided by the light of the Creator in everything that we do, that those curtains also block our intuition and that divine guidance. And by releasing the veils of the ego, we can open ourselves up to a completely different reality. It starts with you knowing that that's possible and then being willing to do this work. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow us on those platforms to receive even more content. You can go to weeklyenergyboost.com and search our archives, send us a message, and learn more about the things that we think are important for our listeners to know about. We always welcome as well for you, while you're at weeklyenergyboost.com, to click the donate button to help support Weekly Energy Boost and make it possible. But more than ever, share this episode. The more ears it reaches, the more veils will be lifted, the more light there will be in our world. And we'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.